Thank you for tuning in to the Logic of God podcast. I'm Cody.
I'm Gina.
And I'm Ben.
If you're returning, thank you for coming back. And if you are a new guest, welcome.
So we left off talking about the connection between the enslavement of the Israelites in chapter 47 of Genesis. And now we're going to try something new for our lovely listeners. We are going to have a more structured debate. This debate is intended to be modeling clay for us to figure out what we want to believe about this chapter and the character of Joseph in it. But the caveat here is that I don't think any of us can really fully make up our minds. And one of the things that I want to stress to the people listening is just like, we don't have all of the answers. And even the best biblical scholars who have dedicated 75 years of their life to studying this one chapter, because there are people that exist like that, they don't even have the answers. And so if you go into a deep dive study on Genesis 47, you may be really unsatisfied. And if that's the case, just know you're not alone. And we're gonna play with this idea. And if it offends you, please let us know, because our intention is not to condone slavery, but we are going to, for the sake of argument, have a debate about slavery. So the question is, or not question, the statement is, to believe Joseph is good, especially in this chapter, is to believe that slavery is sometimes necessary.
Yeah, so should we read the scripture that's revolved around?
Yes, we should probably read that first as an explanation.
So, starting in chapter 47:13, now there was no food in the land, for the famine was severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan in exchange for grain that they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And when the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? For our money is gone." And Joseph answered, "Give your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock, if your money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the herds, and the donkeys. He supplied them with food in exchange for all of their livestock that year. And when that year had ended, they came to him the following year and said, "We will not hide from my lord that all our money is spent. The herds of the livestock are my lord's. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we with our land will be servants to Pharaoh. And give us seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate." So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for all the Egyptians sold their fields, because the famine was severe on them. The land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he had made servants of them from one end of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had fixed allowance from Pharaoh and lived on the allowance that Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they did not sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, "Behold, I have this day bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And at the harvest you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field and for food for your households, and as food for your little ones." And they said, "You have saved our lives. May it please my lord, we will be servants to Pharaoh."
It was their idea.
Yeah. So they thought.
They asked for it. They wanted it, so it's okay.
So I think there are multiple different tiers to this particular issue that we can debate. The first one would be, was it wrong for Joseph to do what he did here? Which is let people sell themselves, their land, everything that they have, including themselves, to him? Should he have just given them grain for free?
Essentially, yes. Like, he collected a tax from these people to have this grain for Pharaoh in the storehouse before. So, like, they are technically were taxed for this money that now Pharaoh is profiting everything from. So I would say you could make some arguments that, yeah, he should have given it to him for free because it was technically theirs in the beginning.
Yeah, so if something similar were to happen today, if a modern day prophet were to go to the president and tell the president that there was going to be a famine across the entirety of the United States and indeed the rest of the world, so bad that no one in the entire world would be able to get food. But before that, we would have a period of bumper crops and we'd be able to have so much food. And then what the government does is, okay, we're going to take 20% of all the food. And since there's so much food, it's not even going to matter. And we're going to store all that up. Like food beyond the dreams of avarice, so much you can't even count it. We're not even going to bother counting it at some point. And then when the famine hits, we'll sell it to the rest of the world. You're right, Cody. If that were to happen today, I would be very angry if the food that I had to give up, now suddenly I need to pay for it.
But look at the pandemic, okay? During the pandemic, we were given stimulus checks. We had to pay that back. That came out of our taxes. So even though we already paid taxes, which in theory paid for the stimulus checks, we then were punished later by repaying what was paid out in stimulus money. It's the same idea.
We have a few examples of this in the United States. Social Security retirement is similar to this. We're all paying into it, and our generation is most likely not going to see any of that.
And then thinking through the pandemic again, just with the fear that everybody had about this unknown illness and how many people were dying and how scared everybody was. And we're like, hey, government, tell us what to do. And they're like, wear a mask and don't leave your house. And we listened, even though it turns out those things weren't really that effective.
Yeah, the trouble here, let's assume for a second that the grain is legitimately Joseph's and Pharaoh's, and it's his to give out. The trouble is that this is a unilateral authority, and they're granting even more authority to these singular two people. And when you concentrate that much power, a lot of problems occur. Remember, we discussed this before with the transition from the time of judges to the time of kings, where suddenly you transition from judges who, it's not a bloodline and it's not universal authority. There are people who are judges over groups of tens and groups of hundreds and groups of thousands. The hardest of the issues goes all the way up to the top judge, and you defer to the judge's authority because the judge was appointed by God. But there are so many other people and so many other chances to get things wrong and then appeal the decision before it gets to this guy. And so it's not centralized authority, truly. It's just there is a highest authority for all of the hardest issues. Then you get to a king, and the king has unilateral complete authority over everything. And God even warns the Israelites, nothing will be yours anymore. The king is going to demand your finest of everything, and he's going to demand your children for his military, and he will demand your fields for himself, as well as demand that you build his palaces. Effectively, Joseph has taken everything from these people. They own nothing. And if Joseph and every person after him were saints, the best people possible, then actually this wouldn't be a bad thing. It's like everything belongs to God, and because God is perfect and completely good, then it isn't a problem for him to own everything. But humans are not angels. And there's a reason why in America we abhorred the idea of a king and we set up a constitutional republic and tried to dilute power as much as possible. Because if you have all of it centralized under one man, if that one man is really good, it's not a problem. But if he's bad,
Even just a little bit.
even just a little bit flawed, even just a little bit not knowing what he's doing, then suddenly everything goes wrong. And we see that. Joseph is a pretty solid guy. And as far as we can tell, there aren't a lot of immediate problems with these people giving him literally everything. But as we see down the line, a lot of problems do develop. Not the least of which is the enslavement, the near permanent enslavement of the Hebrews, and it's only through God's divine assistance they're able to break free.
Yeah, I think the problem in this text a lot of people get to is They believe that they're giving everything to Joseph. Joseph still answers to Pharaoh. Pharaoh is the one in charge here, and the text makes that evidently clear. People tout Joseph as this righteous man, and he very well could have been. And I think he is acting with good intentions here, but he still answers to someone who I don't think anybody would say is a righteous man, that being Pharaoh, and the pharaohs after him. And that is where you set up for a bad intentions in this. And one of the another controversial thing that I want to paint in people's mind is, you ask the question, if we knew a famine was coming and we had time to prepare for it, and if not, we were going to sell ourselves to be fed. We have that prophecy already in Revelation. Like we are warned of the mark of the beast. And I see similar parallels to that being set up here in this story, as you have this economic crisis coming, this famine over the land. You have people who are comfortable and looking to something to provide for them that they can't provide themselves. You have no way to barter or trade. That's the Revelation language. They have lost all of their potential to barter and trade. So now they have to sell themselves, the only thing they have left to survive. And there's just too many parallels there for me, that and I'm not calling Joseph the beast, but almost fits that motif of end times, of setting up this just despair and famine and taking on something and an identity that they shouldn't be taking on.
Again, we said this before. This story is meant to be read in the context of what we know will happen to the Israelites. We know they will eventually be enslaved. It's not meant to be a good thing. And so you can see it as a mark of the beast type thing, whether or not you want to ascribe that level of villainy to Joseph. And I certainly don't.
No.
But the result is the same. And going back to when we hear him practicing divination, Joseph does a lot of things, messes with a lot of ideas and powers he should not. And I think he does it for reasons that he thinks are justifiable. I think that he's so proud of himself, his wisdom, his abilities, that he thinks, no, I can handle it. I need more knowledge. I can handle it. God has given me wisdom. And so all of this power, I can handle it. The ability to dance with the devil, so to speak, to gain power through divination, understanding through spiritual awareness that isn't from God, I can handle that. No, he can't. There is no one good enough.
Even if he he doesn't have the foresight to know what's going to happen after I'm gone. If I'm shielding, he's shielding his family, and if that's for good intention, so they don't assimilate like he did, okay, good. But what after him? We see right after Joseph, he's easily forgotten by the other Pharaoh. And at the end of this chapter, it says they're fruitful and multiply. And that's the downfall for the next Pharaoh in line is, oh crap, this nation has become great. I'm going to have to do something or they're going to overtake me.
Yeah, what should be a good thing turns out to be a problem.
Yeah.
To me, I'm going to start my piece of argument on the fact that the Bible says there will always be poor. There will always be weak, poor people who need help and may also be beyond help. And in thinking through that thought, okay, maybe Joseph just did the best thing he could for his family, and he was smart enough to make Pharaoh super rich and get the people all under control, and he thought that was the responsible thing to do. But in thinking that through for today's context, this is no different than a Chinese child slave labor factory that says we feed them and we clothe them and we house them. And so of course they're going to work for us. What else would they live for? That's not a life. That is a complete violation of humanity. And yet we shop on Amazon, we shop on Shein and Temu, and we expect that we can justify that shop because it's affordable and we might not have very much money to begin with. So we're going to buy the affordable thing, even though it's made on the back of slaves. How is that any different than what Joseph is doing here? And so we're going to say that Joseph should be glorified in every single chapter of Genesis just because he saved his family when he enslaved an entire nation on top of his family intentionally, like for Pharaoh. And we smile about it.
To be fair, they did ask for it.
But he still did it.
So one of the classes I took at Moody, we had to directly head-on challenge the claims that the Bible condones slavery. And most of that is done through like the Paul in New Testament saying, he says, slaves obey your masters, and that's condoning slavery. They would have a much better case for people's opinions of Joseph and in this chapter saying the Bible condones slavery and the whitewashed view that the church holds of Joseph and everything he's doing being good in this chapter, arguing from this standpoint, than they would, I think, in the New Testament.
Of course, in order to take that position, you have to isolate this part of Genesis from literally the beginning of Exodus. To say that this is condoning it is to divorce it from its context, where effectively Moses is using this to explain, yeah, this is our cursed state where we were crying out for deliverance. This is how that happened.
That's if you take that opinion.
Yes.
That's the traditional church view, is like Joseph is righteous. Everything he did was good. He was the suffering Christological viewpoint. He was the epitome of suffering and forgiveness, the righteous man. I don't get how you can get this as righteous in any way, shape, or form.
I think there's the most charitable way that you can take it and the least charitable. And I think the least charitable is unfair to Joseph, where it's just, no, he's evil. He's gone full dictator. He's conquering the world. He's taking everything. And he's not the brain. He's like, tonight, Pinky, we're going to take over the world for Pharaoh. It's like, no, that's not what he is. I think he had the best of intentions, but looking back at the other things that he's done, the best of intentions doesn't matter. Like he played with powers he shouldn't have, and he gave all of this power to someone who should never have gotten it. And I agree with you, Cody, that even if everything was perfect, even if he could master everything that is possible to master on earth and in heaven, including things that are denied to us for a very good reason, he somehow was the perfect man and could do it. And this Pharaoh, let's just say for the sake of argument, this was the perfect Pharaoh too, because he does get blessed by Jacob as well. And he seems to be a pretty generally okay guy, and he got some dreams from God. So he's the perfect Pharaoh too. Okay, great. What about the next Pharaoh? And the one after him? And the one after him? Are we going to have perfect Pharaohs for all eternity? What is your plan to give this land back to the people who sell it? Are they going to have a chance to get it back? Apparently not. He didn't think that far ahead. For a man who constantly had dreams about the future and could interpret the dreams that others had about the future.
He had a 14-year plan.
He had no foresight for what would happen after he was gone.
Yeah.
So one of the things that helps sway me on Joseph's character in this chapter is we get to verse 12 and it says, "And Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all of his father's household with food according to the number of their dependents." Okay, so you have this version of Joseph who reveals his true identity to his brothers, hints at fearing and knowing God, is radically generous to them by providing them with 2 years worth of food, plus whatever he sent to his father to reveal that he was still alive. And then all of a sudden they're settled in Goshen, everything's good, and then they're getting their ration just like everybody else. That stands out to me. I think Joseph had a very good administrative mind, and his capability for tracking what he was selling was profound for the time. I think he gave his family what they needed, but nothing more. And that speaks volumes, because not only do we see the beginning of slavery here, but we see the end of radical generosity from Joseph.
I don't know that he could afford to. We don't know exactly how much food was there, and I think he was acutely aware of how much was there and the rate at which it was going out. But at the same time, you're not wrong, Gina. It doesn't say that he gave abundantly. He's not giving abundantly. He's giving sparingly, and he's giving sparingly to the people outside of his family as well. even if you want to say he's being generous to his family, and he is, he's still making his family work for it. They're tending all of Pharaoh's flocks and herds, and they're working in a job that's abominable. He's putting them to work, and he's giving them their wages for their work. He's not treating them specially. And you could say that's an admirable trait, even, not treating your family any differently.
But it's a dramatic change from the last 2 chapters. He went from this persuasive, generous, loving, forgiving man to a very brutal negotiator.
And is he really giving if there's slavery involved? Like he's not being gracious. He's not being giving. Like that is the whole point of salvation for us. It's a gift. It's not earned. There's nothing you have to do. There's nothing you don't earn. Like they're earning their wages here. Like they're earning by now they have to work. They're in servants. They're giving back what they got. So now Pharaoh is making interest on what he has. Like it's enough to provide for their families and they're serving Pharaoh, but also now Pharaoh is perpetually getting 20% for the rest of forever.
Well, and yeah, these people have no options.
Yeah. It's a dramatic shift in the rulership of Egypt. So you go from this idea of having a more collaborative Egypt to having this one ruler in charge of everything. It's dramatic. That change in 1 chapter, which spans 2 years, that's an absurd change. It's so dramatic. I think it absolutely has to be evaluated. And I'm sorry, but if Joseph is this wonderful savior of his family, like how...
We also do have to be fair in that the idea of a ruler owning land and the people attached to it is not unique to Egypt. In fact, in European history, it was the rule, the whole point of the fiefdoms, the feudal system, that people, serfs, were attached to the land. And you could trade the land, and if you traded the land to someone else, if someone else came into possession of that land somehow, the people on that land belonged to you. It was a different understanding, a different way of thinking, and it's fairly ancient. The way that we think today as more individualistic and as more people have rights and we need to honor those and safeguard those, that's 1, very American, and 2, very new.
I would have to do more research, but I think even in the context of A&E, this was out there for rulership of the kings. If you look at the code of Hammurabi, like there was promises that king made to his people to take care of them, protect them, provide for them, all this stuff that didn't involve them giving up everything that they had and submitting to Pharaoh.
And everybody's required to become a farmer. Like, it doesn't matter what you're good at. It doesn't matter what you know. At this point, he's saying, here's your seeds, go grow it. You keep 4/5 and give Pharaoh 1/5.
I don't know if he's literally telling every single person ever that they need to grow food, but at the same time, it is tough because this is a unique situation. This is a situation that really hasn't popped up much on the earth, where it's one country has literally all of the food and everyone else is coming there to get the food. And there's only one person effectively who holds the food. And so what leverage do you really have? So it's difficult. No matter what, Joseph is put in a unique situation that we don't really have a lot of comparisons to. And no matter what, even if he doesn't enslave these people, he does have an outsized influence on them, no matter what. Effectively, he can make whatever demands he wants of them. And so we can talk about rights that these people have. We can talk about how it's wrong to enslave them. But no matter what, is anything else different from the... Because he has ultimate power over them anyway.
Yeah, but this goes into question of if he is actually giving credit to God or not. If this is from God and this is God turned what was bad and meant it for good, and he's using it to profit for himself and Pharaoh. If he's really giving all glory to God and this is him, if this is from God and he is taking it to use as profit for himself, is he really enacting God's will? Is he really giving credit to God there?
I think we can all agree that part of this is from God. The fact that the dreams came to Pharaoh about the future. The fact that there's the 7 years of bumper crops and the 7 years of famine, all of that is provided by God. The fact that there is a worldwide famine, the idea that Jacob picked up and left Canaan, there's a lot of aspects of this that are from God. And yet what is done with these things that are from God, I don't think has to necessarily be from him. What Joseph does, he could have done differently in a way that honored God. I agree with you. Instead, it seems he did plan for taking everything and putting it under Pharaoh. And he didn't have to plan for that. That was not from God.
No, that was strategy.
Yes.
And like even controlling the narrative, like you brought up earlier, Gina, like how much of the nation knew about this? Like how come Joseph wasn't empowering people to save up 7 years of bumper crops for themselves instead of in the Pharaoh's storehouse? Why did Jacob not know about this? Why did other people not know about this? Like, why wouldn't, if he was not controlling the narrative, why is it just Pharaoh and Joseph that are knowing about what is coming?
You could make the argument that it would be more efficient for centralized collection. Maybe. They might not have had enough space individually to store all of the grain, because he does talk about just how much.
If the U.S. government came to you and said, we are going to go through 7 years of famine, would you be okay with a centralized storage method, or would you want to provide for yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Provide for myself.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Mostly this is just devil's advocate.
I've
because
seen your
all
sugar
of it,
bin.
No, I know. These guys are laughing because they know I do have some emergency food stores. And to be clear, I'm more speaking as a devil's advocate. I want to approach this from as many ways as possible.
That's why
to see
it's a debate.
Yeah.
And we're civil here. Like, I know where Ben stands on this.
Yes. So to be 100% clear, I don't like what Joseph did here. And I think the much better thing would have been to let everyone in Egypt, like basically send out an edict that, like you said, Cody, just, hey, everybody, instead of giving me 1/5 of everything, you collect it yourself, because this is why. I make it an edict across all of Egypt. You have to collect 1/5 and set it aside. And we see something similar done with the Hebrews, where it's like once a week, they had to collect twice as much food to hold on to it while they were going through the desert. Because
Yeah, but God only asks 10%. We get a God discount.
Yeah, and that's another thing that bothered me. I think there are some explanations for why it's 20%, but the fact that it's 20% it bothered me. It's 10% for Joseph and 10% for Pharaoh, and it's double what God would have asked for. It's
Yeah, there's so many. Again, you can play both sides of this. So maybe there was people who knew about the famine, and the people who sold themselves are ones who knew about it but still didn't say we will always have poor.
But it's all of
They were
Egypt.
poor
It
planners.
says all. It's
Yeah.
not. It doesn't say and the dumb people of Egypt sold their land.
And the preppers of Egypt.
Doomsday preppers of Egypt. Yeah. Boy, we got it super clear from heaven. We were going to be getting them 7 years of bumper crops, 7 years of famine. If you sold yourself to Pharaoh, man, you're a big dumb idiot.
I got myself a generator and a ham radius.
It's just me trying to be generous to the text. You will have those people who will know about things and not prepare for it. And the indentured servitude in that sense makes a little bit more sense. Like they can't provide for themselves, so they're going to have to do some form of indentured servitude to be able to be provided for.
Even then, even if we go with, let's say that he told everybody, hey, everybody, there's going to be 7 years of bumper crops and 7 years of famine. Therefore, collect all that grain and give me 1/5 of it, 20%. It's still theirs.
Yeah.
Like you're giving back to them what's there. It's like you said with Social Security. It's like telling people that you now should go and be a slave for the money you paid into Social Security. That makes no sense. But that is effectively what he did. And again, it's like,
You have a whole new generation too. Because if you had 7 good years and then you're on the 5th year of the 7 years of famine, you've had people grow up throughout that time period. So you have a whole new generation that you can take advantage of.
To try to be fair, again, it is a different mentality. It's a different group of people living in a different time with different sensibilities. But at the same time, knowing who the tradition says the author is and knowing what the result of this is, regardless of the culture or the sensibilities, I don't think Moses is trying to tell us that this was a good thing.
No, I would agree with that. I'm trying to paint this as good as I can in but this one is so hard for me to find good in.
They were fed. like for the short term, maybe so let's say for 50 to 100 years, things were stable. Joseph was able to get them through the famine. He was able to make sure that Pharaoh was glorified, which was his job. He was able to save his family. He checked off boxes for his achievement list that made sense. Like, I think we would all probably make similar decisions if we were faced with those things in the moment because they're stressful and chaotic and traumatic. But in the long run, there are generational consequences of these. Joseph didn't think about that. And I think my ancestors certainly didn't think about the generational consequences of the choices that they made. This is a unique perspective. I think maybe our generation is more sensitive to it, but it's not historically been something that has been a popular subject to learn from.
I think we already see that the nature of Joseph's second dream is to say that he rejects his family. Not that he hates them or that he rejects his responsibilities to them or turns them away. He still provides for them, but he no longer is a part of them. That in and of itself shows me that he's not thinking of the future. He's thinking of what is right in front of him. If he was kingdom-minded, as some Christians say today, if he was focused on what is above rather than what is in front of us, then at some point he would have said, okay, this is enough. Egypt is prepared. The rest of the world is prepared. But I need to look towards the future. And what I know is one day the descendants of Abraham will be as the stars in the sky. These are the things that God has already promised us. And he is faithful. Because he has promised it, we know will happen. Therefore, I know everything's going to turn out okay here. I will now shift back to my family and tend to my responsibilities there. That's not what he does. He instead stays in the immediate. And to be fair, that's what we all do. We all struggle to look at the kingdom of heaven and prioritize that above our immediate needs.
It just reminds me of the wealthiest people in America, like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. There have been interviews where people have asked them, when is it going to be enough? When are you going to amass enough wealth for you to just stop? And it's they never do. The job is never finished. They have this unique personality type and obsession, to be successful and to have victory and to win. And they never stop.
It's not unique just to them. It's if you ask anybody, there's always a new threshold.
It's that hedonic adaptation I talk about all the time.
It's that when you have no money, you think, if only I had a little bit of room to breathe. Then you finally get that little bit of room to breathe, and you think, it's nice, but no one's meant to live like this. Just look at where I'm living. If I could just find a better place, if I could get enough money to afford a nice place to rent, and then you're renting. You know what would be really nice? Finding a kind of rundown home. I could buy that and I could fix it up. And then you spend some years in a rundown home you're fixing up. Man, this is no way to live. Everything's going wrong all the time. This home was built in the 1980s. What I need is CBS construction. I need 1,300 square feet minimum. You finally get that. Okay, you know what I really need? I really need a family. I need a wife and kids. I don't have enough money for that. I need more.
You go from thinking spending $100 is an astronomical amount of money to not flinching when you spend $100.
There was a time in my life where just spending $20 was an agonizing decision. And now it really is not that big of a deal to me. I'm not insanely wealthy by any means, but considering where I was in college, completely broke, and everything went to paying for college.
I used to take a calculator to the grocery store. I would, Cody remembers, he would laugh at me. Because I would add up all of the dollars and cents, figure out how much I could round up into my savings account, figure out what coupons I could clip. I was a crazy person, but I was a single mom and I had no choice. And then suddenly I'm married with 3 kids and somewhat have stability financially. And the things that mattered to me, I don't take a calculator to the grocery store anymore. I don't obsess over that stuff. Pennies. I used to. But it's easy to forget where you come from. I think Joseph forgot that he lived in jail.
It's the name of his first kid. Forget. He did a lot of forgetting.
So, slavery. we've ruled it completely unnecessary.
We do not condone slavery.
Yeah, it turns out we don't like it.
Neither does the Bible.
Cody is not pro-prostitution.
I have a very controversial opinion, and I must state it, and I do not care what the backlash is, but I have to say it. I don't approve of slavery. There, I said it. I said it. I don't like it. You all can tear me apart in the comments. I don't care.
Precisely. In fact, if you need ideas for organizations
for slavery, if you need ideas for slavery.
No, organizations that are fighting modern slavery, please reach out. We would love to give you names of places to support that are actively rescuing people enslaved worldwide, but also prosecuting their slave owners, because that piece is very important to getting it to stop.
Yes, there are, I believe, over 40 million slaves in the world right now, which is the largest number of slaves that have ever existed at any time. And that's not as a percentage of the world. Thankfully, as a percentage of the world, it's much lower. However, as a sheer total number of people, it's actually the highest. And unfortunately, a disproportionate amount of those are sex slaves. And there are still some of those who are trafficked in the United States today.
Yes. So do your part, be aware, and give to organizations that are fighting to end slavery, because they are doing the Lord's work. All right. So we jumped around slightly with our little debate, but I'd like to focus momentarily on the chunk of scripture we missed where Jacob is presented to Pharaoh. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but Pharaoh asks Jacob, how many are the days of the years of your life? And Jacob gives this really depressing speech I'm going to read to you. The days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers and the days of their sojourning. His days have been few and evil? It feels like Pharaoh invited him to a party, and like he's the guy that's, yeah, life sucks, dude.
Yeah, the guy who, when you ask how they're doing, tells you how he's really doing.
Yeah. When people lately have been asking me how I'm doing and I tell them the truth and then they just stare at me blankly, it's been fun. Anyway, Jacob gives this little depressing speech and then he goes on and he blesses Pharaoh. Is this like I overshared, bless you?
So there could be some power play here from Jacob, like subtle power play, because, and I'll cover it more in depth when Joseph dies, but like the ideal age and like long age for the Egyptians was like 110 years. And Jacob's here is just blowing that out of the water. And my fathers before me are like way older than me. So there could be some like subtle jabs there to the Egyptian culture, or he could just be talking about how his life has been a struggle. If you go back through scripture and look at Jacob's life, he's the heel grabber. He was always grasping for something that wasn't his. Like he had to be crafty and get the birthright, and then he had to be crafty and whittle his way into the blessing. He had to literally wrestle with God and strive with God. He had his son, his favorite son, taken from him at a young age and had to live with that. He is now face to face with the rest of his family lying to him and that being presented in front of him here. Like his days are evil. Like where's this Christian joy, like this covenantal blessing of just happiness? And where is that in Jacob's story that we've read?
If you say that, if you call that out, no one's going to want to be a Christian.
Yeah, because Christianity and covenantal faithfulness from the human side is just rainbows and daisies and
you'll never
yachts
struggle.
And Porsches, and yeah, that's what it is.
I think we spend a lot of time talking about how Joseph has set things up to where things are just honest enough to get their foot in the door and to get Pharaoh to approve of everything. This seems to me a very honest, open, vulnerable moment with Jacob, where Jacob is being as real as any human being has ever been. He's not holding anything back. He's being honest. And the honest truth is, like you said, Cody, his life has been very long, and a lot of bad things have happened in it. And I think he feels the weight of that now as he recognizes that he's in the last years of his life. And his last years are going to be here, in the place that his grandfather was told his people were going to be enslaved. And it's apart from the land that he was told was the inheritance of his people. But at least he gets to be here with Joseph. It's bittersweet in so many ways. He knows where things are going. And in the future, it's going to be very rough for his people, his children. But at the moment, things are okay-ish.
He's the only one in this room that's talked to God. And we know that in the last chapter, he heard from God. And he's so bummed out here. That's profound for us to think about. God has spoken to me, and I have, in the moment, in the days after, felt this like peace or joy or gratefulness that God chose to speak to me. 2 weeks later, or just like my nervous system gets out of whack or my kid makes me mad, and all of a sudden I feel like I'm acting in this way, of the way that Jacob just described his life. Like, it's evil. I'm here. And the reality is he's just heard from God. And he can only cling to that so much and be comforted by that so much because he knows every single step of his life has been a struggle.
And I think we've all felt this kind of weariness. Not just you. There are points in my life. I am so very blessed with an incredible family, with parents who love me and incredible brothers and sisters. I really should have nothing to complain about. And yet there are moments where things get a little rough. And I look back over everything and it feels as if my whole life was just the blink of an eye up to this point. And you think, what was it really? And that's not the right way to look at it. Yet at the same time, it does feel like this is the appropriate response from Jacob. Looking back over his life and all of the things that happened to him and all of the struggles, there was a lot of good, but there was a lot of evil in it. A lot of bad things done to him and by him, especially in the case of things like not standing up for his kids, his daughter. I think he feels the weight of that. And I think it would be dishonest for him to put on a happy face and be like, you know what, I'm just happy.
He blesses him. He blesses Pharaoh. I should be more specific. Jacob blesses Pharaoh. So there is an element of some sort of friendliness.
Thankful. I think it's thankfulness. He feels grateful. He is grateful, and yet he acknowledges the reality of his life, which is that a lot of bad has happened. I don't think he's just saying, you know what, bad stuff has happened to me, oh, woe is me. I think, no, his days are evil. Evil done to him and by him.
I do think Pharaoh's asking a deeper question here, too. I think it might be a linguistic idiom to say, how many are the days of the years of your life? That's a very verbose way of asking how old somebody is.
And he's also saying he's a wanderer, the years of my sojournings. And that's the truth. How many years did the man actually have rooted in one place, even in the land that was promised to him?
So my follow-up question to this conversation then is, why does the text seem to imply a double blessing for Pharaoh? Because it says before the age that he blessed Pharaoh, and then after again, he blesses Pharaoh. Is this a literal second blessing, like a double portion? Or is this just the same blessing and linguistically that's what we end up with? I know you looked into that, Cody.
Yeah, I couldn't really get too much on that one, whether this was a double portion or a double blessing.
I just want to point out that it's unclear because, again, we don't have all of the answers. And sometimes I think the text just leaves us to wonder.
Yeah, it's tough to know if this is more because we're not told what the blessing is. And so there's some frustrating things that we just have to wonder about. It could be that he's just giving him like a blessing as a greeting and a blessing as a goodbye. Just as they're like Irish blessings. May the wind be ever at your back. May the sun ever be on your face. Simple blessings that are nice. Like they're nice things to say to people and yet have no profound spiritual resonance. And yet we don't see many instances of that in Genesis. Pretty much every time we see someone blessing, it has a deep meaning. So I don't know. I don't know what obviously we're not told what it is, so we don't know how impactful this blessing is meant to be. The fact that it's so brief and mentioned at the very beginning, at the start of the conversation, and at the very end of it as he's leaving, it leads me to think that they are blessings, like quick, simple blessings as a greeting and a goodbye, but I don't know that.
I do just think, too, the way that I interpret it is, people who don't deserve it are going to get blessed. In fact, in my life, it's the most unholy people that have the most success. And so maybe this is just another example of that ironic case of blessing for somebody who truly doesn't deserve it, isn't God honoring, has no care in the world for other people's well-being, and yet somehow has a double portion of blessing.
Yeah, I do want to bring up a potential and see your guys' thought on this of why Jacob is seeming down coming into this. At the end of this chapter in 29, when Jacob is nearing death, he calls Joseph in and makes Joseph swear not to bury him in Egypt. So he has the famous covenantal thigh grab, which we described what that was in previous episodes, but then again makes him swear after the covenantal thigh grab. So some of the texts here say that Jacob was trying to remind Joseph where he comes from. So the thigh grab was really the circumcised area. So he would... That covenantal promise that Joseph had and that the family had would be forefront in his mind, and he was trying to remind Joseph of that. But then again, he makes him swear after the covenant promise that Joseph makes, saying that he'll bury him. And it's almost Jacob is seeing Joseph's full assimilation into Egypt. Like he's going into the court and he's heavy-hearted because he sees where his favorite son is. And the end of the text here to me points to Jacob realizing that his son is not his own anymore.
He can't be trusted.
I don't even know that it's necessarily he sees him as not being able to be trusted, because he does make Joseph swear that his bones will be returned to the land of his fathers. But I think he recognizes, just as Joseph's second dream showed, or what I believe it showed, he really did lose his son. That the man he's meeting now bears his son's face, occupies his body, but it's not him.
Yeah, A&E promises and oaths on burial are very rare for sons, because it was just assumed that the heirs knew where the fathers wanted to be buried. And you do see the same idea with Joseph at the end of his life. So maybe he did remember his father on his deathbed to not be buried there, and Moses ends up taking the bones of Joseph to be buried in Israel. But the double swearing that Jacob asks of Joseph does seem like he's scared that he will not be taken back to the promised land, the land that was promised to Israel.
I don't think it's even just about where he wants to be buried. I think what he's saying is, remember God's promise for our family. Remember what a covenant really is. Like, Jacob might be the last in his family in this generation to truly understand what covenantal faithfulness looks like and is supposed to be.
We didn't actually read the verses, so real quick, I'll do that. This is starting in verse 29. And when the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "If now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place." He answered, "I will do as you have said." And he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. Then Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. He does end up doing it. And I think he really wanted his son to do it, because he wanted to remind him, his favorite son, the son who he has effectively lost for a second time, he wanted him to go back home and see the land that was promised to him. Because remember, he didn't go to Canaan to see him. They had to meet him in Goshen. So he's asking him, out of all of his brothers, and I imagine he would take his brothers with him. That would be the plan. But telling him to go to Israel back to the tomb of his ancestors to remember.
Yeah. He hints at so much in just this little tiny snippet. And we are going to miss that profound intensity once Jacob is gone, because I think he's the only one still clinging to that promise from God. And I think that's part of why everybody ends up where they do.
So one of the last points I want to make before I think we close this chapter is in verse 11. It says, "Then Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them the possession of the land of Egypt and the best of the land and the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded." So this is one of those things where, knowing the textual criticism and the document hypothesis and responses to that come in handy, because if you take the early date of Joseph here, it is the 14th or 15th century BC, and Ramesses was in the 13th century BC. So there is some textual addition here from the author. So this also postdates the time of Moses. So that would have been, Joseph was before that. The time of the early date of Exodus is 15th century BC, and the time of Ramesses is 13th century BC. So this postdates Moses. So Moses would have had to been 200 years older to write about the land of Ramesses. So this is proof in our English textual Bible, if you take the earlier date of the Exodus, that there are additions in Genesis.
And that doesn't bother me.
In fact, this is something that happens in pretty much every book of the Bible. One of the biggest, hottest debates is the age of the book of Daniel, whether or not it was actually written at the time of Daniel, by Daniel, or if it was written hundreds of years after. And the reason is because the type of Aramaic that's used seems to be a blend both of old Aramaic from the time that Daniel would have lived and a newer Aramaic that developed long after. And so there's, as time goes on, words that are updated, because just like we update editions of the Bible, there are words that are no longer in use, that don't make any sense. Cody talks about the KJV. The word gay means something very different in the time where the KJV was written to the time that it is now. And so the writers of, or the copiers of these ancient texts are aware that in order to maintain intelligibility, you need to update the language. So they kept the same language, but sometimes updated the words. And we do similar things where nobody knows where Prussia is or was, but we know where Germany is. And so you'll use the name, what is modern Germany? A lot of the times we'll talk about what is modern Pakistan, what is modern Iraq, what is modern Syria, to let people know where certain events happened in the older times. And the writers or the updaters and the copiers of the Bible did the same thing. I'm not bothered by the idea that the names of cities were updated because later audiences wouldn't have known what the original names were.
I saw this video this week. So there was a guy who is like a scholar of language, and he was trying to show how different English was throughout its development. So he started in today's language and went back 5 layers. And by the time he got to the third of the 5, it was already unintelligible. So like language changes over time so very much. And we rely on that for comprehension.
Yeah, Cody, you talked to me one time about the translation of Miriam's song and how that's one of the first challenges that is given to people who are translating biblical Hebrew. It is so radically different from the biblical Hebrew that you see throughout much of the rest of the Bible that it's so hard to figure out just what on earth this woman is saying.
What else is new?
Because it's a well-preserved song. It's supposed to be as close to the original as you can get without getting your eyes wet. And so because it's so old, the language is just different. Different words meant different things. Different sounds meant different things.
It's like Song of Solomon. Your hair is like a flock of goats.
Great pickup line for the time. Doesn't really work today.
Ben knows he's tried.
I have tried. This is why I'm still single, ladies.
My bringing that up is not to throw shade at anyone, but those people who hold to the earlier dates, I'm not going to pick whichever date you want. That's not salvific, so I'm not going to argue with you. But you look like a fool when you say there's been no updates. There's been no changes or additions from earlier dates if you're holding to that. Like Moses couldn't have written about his death. Moses couldn't have known about the land of Ramesses if it was 200 years after him. So he did not write that. So there are updates, and that's okay. Like it does not question the authority of the Bible unless you steel man or stubbornly put your foot down and say, oh yeah, no, Moses wrote 100% of it. You look like a fool because he didn't write about his own death and he didn't make these updates, but that is not the point of scripture.
And these have survived oral tradition over centuries, millennia, and survived and are confirmed by like varying texts.
Yeah. So my reason for bringing that up is just it damages the witness of God if people are so stubborn to not admit to certain things in texts that we have.
Also, modern archaeology confirms this. Confirms that they settled in the land of Ramesses. So it's cool because somebody a long time ago thought to include that detail in the scriptures, and we have that today confirmed by archaeology. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our podcast today. If you liked what you heard, please feel free to subscribe and share and leave a positive review. And if you would like to connect with us on social media, you can do so on Instagram and Facebook at The Logic of God. You can also send us an email at main.thelogicofgod@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. We hope you have a great day.